just create a new project. Then I'll create I'll create a staff class. Staff as a base class. Forgot to put it in there. Okay. Then I'll create another class, junior staff, which will inherit from what? The staff. Now, there's another way of inheriting instead of always typing. You can see here, you have the super class here. So if I want to inherit from the staff, I just go to browse. Then you start searching for the name of the class you want to inherit from. At the moment, I want to inherit from what? Staff. Always check the package. Sometimes you might have more than one what? Class with the same name. Differentiate them by what? The package. So once I've seen it, I press OK. Then I want to place this in the package. So com dot. So okay. This in the default, so I'll bring it back to the normal package. Okay. So this is a junior staff and this is a senior staff. In the staff class, I'll give you some attributes. So private, unless for instance variable members, and static variable members, and the final. Unless you want to share, you are advised to make them what? Private, to ensure encapsulation. Then once you make them private, you can use other methods to expose them. So I'll create string name private and ID, then private string rank. So I have three attributes. Or three instance member for this staff class. Now I want to create a constructor for this class. Now this is how it works. When you create a class and you don't provide any constructor, let me just demonstrate that. I'll create a test class. I'll give it public static void main. Then here I'll create an instance of the staff. You can see I've not created any constructor yet, but I'm getting the what? The default constructor. The default constructor is provided for you always if the class doesn't have any constructor. It's a privilege. You only get it when you don't declare any what? Constructor. But once you declare your own constructor, you lose that privilege. So this here is a default constructor. But when we look inside our class, there's no what? Constructor. So the default is provided for you when you don't provide any what? Constructor. Because the constructor is required by what? Every class when you want to create an instance of that class. So this default constructor comes. But immediately we create our own what? Let me print this guy out. You won't see anything for now. I'll just print the stuff. I'll explain why. I'll print the stuff, run it. You get com.kofi.anan.ait.staff at whatever. You call it the hash code of the class. Each object has a unique ID. What do I mean by that? Let me create another object or reference to an object. weekend staff is equal to new staff, and I print the weekend staff out. Weekend staff. I'll print both classes. You can see that this is what 5D F9 AED. That's for the first one, and this one is what 33469E. We use this hash codes to identify each unique object so that we can track its memory and other properties. We will overload this. This is coming from the object class, the default to string class, if you don't override it. Now here, I'll create my constructor, and the constructor should be the same name as the class. So staff. If I do this, I've overridden the what? The default constructor. The condition is anytime a class doesn't have any constructor, JVM provides you a default one. But once you create your own, you lose that privilege. You can see this constructor at the moment, the access specifier is what? Package level. It cannot be accessed outside of what? This package. What do I mean by that? I'll create another class and give it a different package. Outsider. Then outside, maybe outside stuff. Outside stuff. This is an outside stuff. When I try to create an instance of the stuff, at the moment, the constructor there is what? The constructor there is private. I want the stuff. You see what I'm getting? Let's read out. The constructor stuff is not what? Visible, because we made it what? Package level. So if I want to make it open, I make it what? Public. When I make it public, now the error will be gone. Back to where I was. Now this constructor, this is the default constructor. To know whether which one is working, I'll just this out. Default setter. Default constructor. Save. Now let's run this code again, the test, and see. This time you see what? Default constructor, default constructor. Because we provided our own constructor, we've lost that privilege of what? The default constructor that was provided to us by the what? The JVM. By the JVM. Let me remove this stuff here. Now let's come to this junior stuff. It's already extending from what? This stuff. It's already extending from this stuff. I will add another constructor. This time the constructor will take a parameter. So stuff and I'll give it string name, string rank, int id. So I've created another constructor that takes what? 3 parameters. So this is a parameterized constructor. This default this parameterized. I want to know what I'm in this one, so I'll just say within params setup. Here I have this base class junior staff, which is extending from what? Staff. I want to create a constructor for this guy. So junior, you can only start typing the name of the class and you press the control space, it gives you what? The default constructor as what? As suggesting. I'll press enter. It create this one for me. Now this is what I want to do. I'll just test out junior staff sitter. Then I'll come to the test class. Then I'll create an instance of a junior staff. I'll comment these two guys. Create an instance of the junior staff. Junior staff is equal to new junior staff. I'll just run this site. I've just created an instance. I want to see there's an order in which the constructor is being called when one class inherits another. You can see the default, let me reframe it, default staff default sitter. So I run it again. Staff default sitter, junior what? Sitter. So even though here we are not calling the what? The superclass constructor explicitly. Once you inherit from one class, the superclass will be called before the subclass is what? Called. Now, there are situations where in this class, here in the parameterized constructor, we said we can use the constructor to initialize some stuff. So this is what I want to do. I want to initialize these values to this. What do I mean? When I say name, if you already discussed this keyword, right? It's equal to name. So we are using this to initialize this. From now on, any class that you create, always make sure you override the toString. So I will override the toString. Then override the toString method. toString method, this method. Override means give it a different word, definition. If you don't override it, remember here when we're printing this in the test, when I print junior staff as at now, when I run this, I get com.kofi.anan.aiti.junior staff. You get the hash code of that object, of this junior staff object. I don't want that one to be printed. Anytime someone prints it, I will say that if someone print this, then it should look like this. So anytime someone prints, I want it to look like, it should print name is equal to what is the name? Is the name okay? The name is private, so you don't have access to it. The name is private, so you don't have access to it. If I want to have access to it, what do I do? What do I do? I want to have access to this name in this base class or subclass. What do I do in the base class or the superclass to have access to name? Protected or default, one of them. So when I make it protected, here I can have access to what? The name. Can have access to the name. So the same code, when I come here this time around and I run it, it gives us what? Null. Now it's giving us null because this junior staff, we didn't set any what? Name to it. This name constructor is in the what? The staff. So this is what we want to do. Anytime you create an object, you want to what? Call this superclass constructor. Now if you want to call the superclass constructor, you use the super keyword to call it. What do I mean by that? Here, I'll also create another constructor, junior staff. Then I'll pass it name. So string name, rank, and ID. Then here, I'll just say, instead of reinitializing it to these values which I think I will need them here, let me make all of them protected for the sake of protected, so that I'll have access to them in the base class or the subclass. Instead of me creating my own method to do whatever this constructor is already doing, I will call the superclass constructor to do that one for me. Someone is already doing it, so why should I do it again? So if you're in a subclass and you're calling the superclass constructor, this is how you go by it. Here, I'll just use the super keyword, super, just like calling a method. Then I'll pass the number of parentheses of the constructor. When I say the constructor, this superclass parameterized constructor. This one takes how many parameters? 3. So I have to pass those parameters to it. So when I say this, so I'll pass name, rank, and what? ID. So this one is calling the what? The superclass constructor and passing the parameters to it. How do we know? Let me just sys out this superclass constructor. Within super or staff param or something. Param. Then here I'll sys out now in junior sitter param. Now once you have this, when I'm creating the object, this time I don't want you to call the what? The default constructor. And I said anytime you provide a constructor, you lose the privilege of having what? The default constructor. So when I cut this one out, when I remove the default constructor from the junior staff, now I'll get an error because this default constructor does no longer exist. Once you provide a constructor in your class, whether it's a default constructor, a parameters constructor, you lose that privilege of what? The default constructor. So this one doesn't exist unless I create it. So I bring it back. Then I'll not use that stuff. By this time, when I'm creating, I'll be told I have more than one what? Overload. More than one overload. So I want the second one. Then I'll pass the name to it. Kofi, rank, senior. Then ID maybe 23. So I've created this object by passing these parameters to it. And I said anytime you create your user-defined class, make sure you override the what? To string. And this to string, I'm trying to print the name. So I said name is equal to what? Name. Now we have access to all the other data members. So let me just add the rest. Rank S plus rank. To return the rank. It's getting this from the what? The protected member from the what? The superclass. Plus ID S plus ID. So when I save this and I come to the test, when I run it, this time what do you get? Within param sitter, within staff param, then now in the what? Junior sitter param. Then Kofi, so name is Kofi, rank is senior, and ID is what? 23. Again, In the senior staff, in the staff class, you have three protected members: name, ID, and rank. You have a default constructor in the what? Staff class. You also have a parameterized constructor in the staff class, which takes three parameters. It takes the name, ID, and rank and sets it to the one in the class level. So when I call the constructor and I give it three parameters, to take those parameters and go and set it to the instance member class variables, instance member variables. Then whatever that you want to do with it, you do with it in the class. Now, we've also created a junior staff class that inherits from the senior staff or the staff class. Then the junior staff also has its default constructor. It also has what? A parameterized constructor. But this time, because the constructor here, the work that we want to do, someone is already doing, and that person happens to be our what? Our super class. There's no point in what? Reinventing the wheel. So we just tell the super class, please, whatever that you did there, come and do it for me. So once you say super keyword, it means you are referring to what? Your super class. Now when you do this, it means call the what? Constructor. Just is like the super will be replaced with what? The staff. Anytime you see staff with this three parameter, we are referring to what? This what? Constructor. So this one we call the super class constructor. Then I said, from now on, any class that you create, make sure you override what? To string, so that you know how your object will look like. Other than that, you get a hash code of each object. So this to string, this is what you are doing. And this to string is coming from the object class, which is the what? The grandfather of all the what? Classes. Whether you explicitly inherit from that class or not. So once we are done, in here you are printing the name here, you are printing the rank. Now when you come here, I want you to notice something. When you create the junior staff is also a what? A staff. When I say it's also a staff, it's a product of the what? The staff. The staff is the what? The super class. So the junior staff is also a staff. When I create this, observe the call of the constructors. Here, this within what? Parameter. That's the first one. This is a within parameter. This one is called first. Then within staff param, the same constructor. Before it's come and call what? Now in the what? Junior what? Seater param, because we explicitly what? Called it using the what? The super keyword. The super keyword to call the super class constructor. Then finally, we call the what? To string method to what? To print out how we formatted it. So this is how I formatted my what? The output of the what? Each object. So anytime you use the super keyword to call a super class constructor, if that constructor only exists in the super class, there will be no problem. You just have to call it by what? The super keyword. Then you pass the corresponding parameters that you want to call it. Just as you are calling a method. But this time, because you are a subclass, you don't have to use the word, the constructor name or the method name. You use the word, the super keyword, and you pass those parameters to it. That's one case. There are other situations where here, within the same class, you might have more than one constructor, but one is doing something that you already want. So assuming this one in the staff constructor, I want to make sure that name is empty, ID is equal to 0, and rank is also empty. This is the work I've given to this one parameters constructor to do for me. Now, what this guy is doing, this constructor here is interested in it. This constructor is interested in it. Let me create a third constructor. But this time, this constructor will take only, I'll let it take, it's just like a normal method. You can't have the same method names in one class. It will complain this already what? As a duplicate method. So I'll let this one take just a name. Then I want, when you have more than one constructor in your class, and you want to call each other, like one constructor want to call another constructor, you use the what? This keyword, just like any other method. When you are in the same class, use the this. It means look inside the class. There's someone like this and call him for me. So I want to call this default constructor. So I'll say this. Then because this is a what? A constructor, you must make sure it looks like the constructor. So this and this. So when I do this, this one means call the default setter in this class. That's what we are doing. So this means that jump and come and call whatever this method is doing or this constructor is doing and do it here for me. Let's test it. In my test class, I'll just comment this guy. And for us to know that it's working, let's make it. So that's what we'll do. It's okay. Let me just call this one. I don't want to make it too complex. So here, I'll create another stuff, just a stuff. By this time, you can see you have 3 different overloads. The one that doesn't take any parameter, the one which takes what? 1 parameter, and the last one which takes what? 3. You can have as many overloads as you want, just like any other method. Always remember, a constructor is a special kind of what? Method. So whatever you can do to the method, you can do to it. I want to call the second one. I'll just pass some name to it. Then here, in order for us to know whether we are in this, I'll just put some sys out. Single staff setter. Then I'll just, this one, you know that this one was called. So when I run this, you see that you have what? Single staff what? Staff default setter called before the what? Single staff what? Setter. If I comment this guy out and I run the same code, I only get what? Single staff what? Setter, because I didn't call what? The default constructor. So if you have more than one constructor and you want to communicate with each other, it's like inter-process calls. Where is what? Inter what? Constructor what? Communication. You use the what? The this keyword within the class to call the other what? Constructor. Now there's another rule. Anytime you are performing any of this, either if you are in your same class and one constructor is calling the same another constructor in the same class, and you are using the this to call that constructor, the this keyword should be the only first statement in that block. The this statement should be the first statement in that block. Like this. This statement should be the first statement in that block. When I swap, I just bring this guy up. I'll get an error. That's what I mean. It should be the first statement. Comment is not a statement, it's commented. And what does it say? Constructor call must be the first statement in a what? A constructor. So anytime you are in a constructor and you are calling a different constructor, either within the same class or outside the class, it should be the first statement in that block. Okay. It's the same with, remember when it comes to the junior staff too, this one is also a constructor call. This one too should be the first statement in the what? In the block. Let me just move this guy and bring him up and see what we get. We also get an error. A constructor call must be the first statement in a what? A constructor. So if you have intention of calling any other constructor, either within your class or from your super class, it should be the what? The first statement in that what? That constructor.